Hey guys, it's Eduardo with the Partners in Real Estate team. I have recently come across a book that I have really gotten into, and it's super simple, and so I kind of felt it was worth sharing with y'all. And so the book is, as you can see here, it's called The Honeybee, and it's a parable, right? So it's not a true based on the true story type of thing, but it's a great kind of little source of nuggets that help folks to kind of want to get to that next level, giving them some concrete steps to get on that path, right? And so this book is reading by Jake Stenziano and Gino Barbaro. And so I really, really recommend it. I'm going to try to put out some videos over this next couple of weeks to help just kind of synthesize the information a little bit for you guys, because I really do feel like I've shared with you guys, I'm a realtor, but I love this stuff. At the end of the day, I am about financial freedom, meaning that you have the option to do whatever you want to bring some level of contribution beyond what you may feel you're able to do into this world. So that's why I love reading these kind of books and why I recommend them. And so here's just kind of a couple of quick tips to keep this video short and sweet. So the first two recommendations of this book, and in a nutshell, is the stories of an individual that's looking for that financial freedom, ends up connecting through a car incident, a flat tire, with a mentor essentially that is able to provide him with these nuggets using the parable of beekeeping, or using the bees as the ways to kind of explain how he can go about learning and growing and setting himself up for this financial freedom, right? So the first tip that he really gives him is you got to escape the honey trap. And the honey trap within the context of the book is like a lot of us are guilty to falling into. It is tough. Once we're making money, regardless of how little we feel it amounts to, right? If we're feeling that it's not a fair trade-off for our time skills, compared to what comes into our bank account, nevertheless, there is this kind of fear, for all intents and purposes, of not having that honey come in, right? That money coming in. And so we fall into the honey trap and we say, well, there's nothing I can do, right? And so in order to really kind of start setting yourself free and give yourself option, and the answer may not be that you have to leave your job, right? At least not anytime soon. But the answer may be, can you create some breathing room so you can have more options? Because at the end of the day, that is what financial freedom is. It's just having more options. And so the steps that they outline in their kind of quick summary at the end are these: create a budget, right? I know for myself and my wife, we used to do this on a regular basis, and we used to exceed it on a regular basis. So just saying create a budget is not enough. At least it wasn't for us. One of the things that really, really worked for us, and it was a great tip that we got from Mindy Jensen off of the Bigger Pockets podcast, was I'm calling it a proactive budget. I forget what she calls it, but essentially it's a spreadsheet, right, that you pre-fill with those absolute must expenses that you are committed to every month. So that's your rent or mortgage, if you have a car payment, your cell phone, all of those bills that no matter what are due every single month. And so you front load all of those, right? And just like you would with a checkbook, what you're doing is accounting for the amount and then adding everything up so that you are keeping a running tally of what your expenses are. And every time you make an expense, literally the habit is to have this sheet in physical form right by the front door. So as you walk in, if you spend $2 on a pack of gum, you come home and the first thing you do after you put your keys down and kick your shoes off is grab the pencil or pen and log it in there, right? And then add it to the balance, so that what you're doing is you are following your expenses for that month. Man, that process alone was eye-opening for us, right? Because we had set all these goals for, like, here's how much we want to spend for groceries, here's how much we want to spend for this. And we felt so good after spending a few hours, if not an entire afternoon, trying to pull our budget together, only to find that at the end of the month, we had exceeded it. And then beating ourselves up for having done so, right? And saying, well, we're never going to do this. But by doing this process, what we found was once we accounted for all of the must-have expenses or the must-do expenses, we found we had very little wiggle room. And so what it triggered for us was being way more intentional about when we gave ourselves the freedom to go out and have that little treat, right? So we still ate out, but we were much more intentional about doing it, with some planning, not just like, well, I don't feel like cooking, let's just go out, right? And so you're able to kind of track your expenses and adjust accordingly. By the end of the first 2 months that we did this, we saw ourselves growing a little bit more of our savings than we had previously, and definitely not exceeding our budget. So highly recommend it. That kind of correlates with the next tip that they give, right? Try to save as much as you can. And typically, what I have found to be the best kind of way of doing this is to kind of put it out of sight, out of mind, because we have the tendency to look into our bank accounts and just say, well, I have X amount, right? And so we have this, it's called our profit account, based on a book called Profit First that I also strongly recommend. But we have it on a completely separate bank where we don't even have an ATM card for it, right? We have to physically go into the bank to actually pull any money from this thing. And so by it being out of sight, it is not a bank account that I look at on any regular basis. We're able to squirrel away funds so that when we do remember it's there, we're looking at it like, whoa, there's money there, right? Because we could transfer money into it ourselves, which is great. So it just kind of allows us to kind of start to build that up so that we have a little bit more wiggle room there. The goal, because a lot of people say, well, how much do I save, right? So on a minimum basis, the goal, if you're starting from scratch, is to be able to put about $1,000 in the bank that are just sitting there. You're not tapping into it to kind of make up for, little gaps here and there. It's just sitting there, and it truly is an emergency fund, right? Just something significant happens with the car, boom, there you go. You're not kind of out to dry. And so that's goal number one, be to save $1,000, right? And this syncs up with some of the other gurus that you've heard, but at minimum something like that. And then ideally about 3 to 6 months of reserves, at minimum 3, right? What that means is once you account for what your monthly expenses are, that you're saving up 3 to 6 times that are just, again, sitting there in case you do want to have the option to explore a career change or a job change, or to, just give yourself that flexibility and that opportunity by knowing that your expenses are covered for the next 3 to 6 months. In order to do that, a lot of people say, well, how am I going to do that? I'm barely eking by, right? And that's the reality that a lot of us are dealing with. Like, we had just not too long ago been able to kind of break out of that cycle and start to kind of breathe a little bit more. And so I want the same for you. And so there's ways to do this, right? So tip number two within the honeybee is find your surplus. And so here it talks about in the stream metaphors in part of the book, but just kind of take it for what it is here. Every stream has a source. Every income stream has a source, right? So here it's saying, like, look, if you're not in a position to take on an extra gig, right, do something a little extra to earn some money, then at minimum, try to find where you can cut your expenses. What we find, though, and this is my wife and I kind of go back and forth on this, and luckily we kind of have been able to move past it, but I think the tendency is like cut everything, right? Like, do we need Netflix, Hulu, Peacock? We don't have HBO, but we have, I think those are the main ones. Do you need all those? And the tendency is like, oh, let's cut them. It's not that it's not a bad idea, but cutting a $8 or $15 a month expense, unfortunately, is not what's going to get you there, right? Because if you look at that, multiply it out over the course of the year, you're talking about a savings of about $150, which is better than nothing. Absolutely better than nothing. But that's not what's going to get you to that financial freedom mode, right? So try to find ways that you can truly cut big. So it could be that if you have a spare room, can you sub-rent it out, right? Because now that room that is just sitting there for the most part, is generating $500 to $600 a month. Now that's the kind of money that will allow you to have that opportunity on a much faster timeline. Do you have a basement? Do you have space in your backyard to throw up an air? I know that's a big expense, but I mean, like, I was just talking to clients at a property the other day about that, but like an Airstream back there, you can Airbnb. So think of ways that you can actually generate income. Given the gig economy that we're in, it's not about committing to doing it 8 hours a day, but maybe picking up some shifts, dropping food off, or picking people up and dropping them off, right? There's ways to go about to generate a little bit of extra that's going to give you that breathing room. So these are the first 2 tips of this. I'm going to try to post, these videos on a fairly regular basis, ideally no more than 2 days apart. But yeah, this I felt was kind of the best, a great way to kind of get started for those of you that are kind of trying to think, like, how do I get on this path? This is it. Really try to create that budget, start to save some money so that you can start creating that breathing room and that opportunity to make some different decisions. And in order to do that, try to find ways that you can create that surplus, whether it's really doing some significant cuts to your expenses, or finding ways to leverage your time, your efforts, your skills to pick up some additional funds, right? So even if you don't want to go out and drive, there are things like, if you're not familiar with it, Fiverr, Fiverr. That's an online gig economy where you could bid on projects, right? And if you have a skill set, website design, just design, writing, whatever it is, voiceovers, you could bid on projects there, and it may not be significant, but it may be enough to kind of get you. And who knows, you might pick up a little side hobby there that actually generates some income for you. So these are the first two. Hope that they're helpful. Looking forward to coming back with you on the next one. And so, yeah, reach out if you have any questions about this, about real estate, about financial independence. Happy to have those conversations with you guys. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you on the next one.